Welcome, everyone, to our second forum today. We invite you to, we're going to actually have Mr. Duncan do a quick budget update. But once the budget update is over, we encourage anyone that has a question. It does not have to be about the budget. It can be about anything that you have a question about. So we have quite a few staff here. I'm going to introduce trustees. Mrs. Thompson is to my right. Mr. Jackman is to my left. Online, we have Mr. Mickelson and Mr. Reedy. We have Superintendent McGovern. We have Mr. Klingenpeel, our Transportation Director. Mrs. Garner, the Curriculum Director. Mrs. Bolton, our HR. Mr. Celeroli from Facilities. Mrs. Tolman from our Technology Department. And Scott Duncan, our Mr. Budget.
Mr. Budget.
Mr. Budget.
I love it.
Mr. Budget, our Chief Financial Officer.
I've been called much worse.
I'm gonna get a shirt made for you, Scott.
So with that, we'll go ahead and move to Mr. Duncan. And if you would kind of give us a brief up to date on the budget, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So last Monday, we were able to present a balanced preliminary budget. So I'd like to just run through some of the highlights of that. First of all, a shout out should go out to the schools, the departments, Superintendent McGovern, the ladies in my office, and Mrs. Bolton specifically for the heavy lifting that she did and the staffing part of our budget. Next year, we're estimating ADMs, and that's average daily membership of about 5,204, and that's down 146 from this current year. The year after that, so in 22-23, we expect to be down another 95 ADMs, and then the year after that, 139 ADMs. And what's keeping our funding buoyed now is the 3-year rolling average, because we get funded based on our current ADMs, the higher of our current ADMs, or the 3-year rolling. And so now it's the 3-year rolling that's buoying us up, and that starts to run out in fiscal year 23-24. As far as our foundation guarantee goes, we're down about 2.8 from this year. So the previous year, if you're looking at next year, most of that is due to the decrease in our ADMs. There's also some decreases in our bus leases as we are paying off a number of buses in this current year. Therefore, we don't get any funding for next year. There's also a negative external cost adjustment that's in the statutes now, about $425,000. And our transportation and special ed is down about 3.48. And as a point of clarification from the earlier estimates, that the transportation and special ed were down about 1.9. So we made the adjustments for that, and we'll talk a little bit more of the cuts that we needed to make to balance the budget a little bit later. Also worth noting that there's an amount in here for purchasing new DARA buses, and that's the federal program that lets you switch out diesel-fueled buses for newer propane-fueled buses. And so the federal government covers a portion of that, and then the state covers the remainder of it with the reimbursement of the state's part coming in the following year. If you look down on the expenditure part, there's about 5.6 in cuts. About 500,000 of that is in our health insurance estimate, that we were able to keep the budget the same going forward, even though we expect a slight increase in our premiums. The remainder of 5.1, that's mainly our salaries and our benefits, staffing, and some other cuts. But again, that's a lot of the heavy lifting that Mrs. Bolton had to do to be able to balance the budget. Going a little bit further down, the food service program, we found out that the federal program will give them, full reimbursement for the meals that they purchase over the next fiscal year. And so we don't feel we need to make a subsidy transfer to the food service operations next year. So that's coming off. And also There's an adjustment for not rolling over the purchase orders, and we still would like to do that if we can. And things, change from now until we hit the final budget, but we'll just have to wait and see on that one. So in the end, we're using about 2.7 of our cash to balance the budget. That leaves about 8.6 that's in reserve or earmarked as one-time money. And that keeps us at about 11.4, which is an amount that we normally carry over to be able to keep underneath that 15% limit that's set out by statute. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions, comments?
Just a point of clarification. When Mr. Duncan is talking about ADM, that's average daily membership. And basically what that is our enrollment. And the biggest portion of the funding under the state funding model comes from our enrollment. And as he explained, we're still losing students, so we are in a 3-year rolling average so that we don't have the direct impact of having all those negative numbers coming in at one time. If we were to grow, then you would receive those monies promptly. But it's a way of smoothing out so that the cliffs don't come quite as regularly. So, but that's just a clarification. Okay, so I guess we are ready to start some questions.
We don't have anything yet.
Okay. I would like to recognize Mrs. Gunter. She's joined us from the Special Ed Department, Assistant Director from the Special Ed Department. So let's see, I'm trying to think if there's anything that we want to start off with. Mm-hmm. Superintendent McGovern, do you have something that you'd like to start off with?
Sure, maybe just to get us rolling a little bit. This morning, after Scott presented the budget, we went into the transition day from yesterday for our K through 6 schools. And so if any of our parents or community members or staff members have any feedback on that, whether good or bad, or how that went, hopefully our students are feeling and our staff much more comfortable as we get ready for next year. So any ideas in the chat would be great for us. So something to think about. And then also from this morning, while we're waiting for everybody to get going, Dan, if you want to talk a little bit about what our schools are going to be going through as we get going with the renovations and such, that might be nice for our community to hear if they missed that from Monday.
Sure. This summer, we're going to have approximately 20 construction, everything from a large construction project to a small construction project. And I do want to explain because people are going to drive by and see Head Start will be empty, the old Washington school, I should say. And while these schools are empty, I want to explain the difference between closing a school and mothballing a school. When we mothball a school, we still get a certain amount of major maintenance money towards that school for the repairs. The whole idea is to keep them mothballed until you can get rid of them, or however you choose to do that, sell it, demo it, whichever your solution is. And Washington being the oldest, that one we're just going to mothball and try to dispose of it. The reason why we're moving some of that program into Westridge is because Westridge will still be receiving major maintenance money. Now, it's not going to get major maintenance money like we normally get for the formula, so many ADMs, because Head Start, according to the School Facilities Commission, they fall under an administrative building, much like this building, the maintenance office, and transportation. So we just get a straight allotment for that price or for that building. What we're going to be doing there is we're still finishing up on some of the heat pump systems because of ESSER funds that gave us the ability to finish up that project. The reason why we're putting money into Westridge is I just can't believe that this economy in our community is going to stay bad. I just think that it's going to have an upswing. Once it does, once we start noticing that we're starting to get more kids into the district, that school will be ready and it will meet what we currently call suitability. So the suitability score it's a score that the state looks at as far as equitability across the state changes, because as you build new schools and you eliminate old schools, the old schools The reason why they're getting rid of them is either condition or capacity, and they're just building larger schools. The larger schools tend to have air conditioning. They tend to have better ventilation systems, more efficient boilers and things like that. So these are what the state has determined are contribute to the suitability of education, having a good environment for the kids to learn in. So it is our intention to take some of the major maintenance money that we get for that building and some grant money that we have available to us through energy bills and things like that, and bring that building up to current suitability standards. Then that way, when the capacity starts coming back, we have a school that kids, students, we can put students in, and they are just as good a condition as a new building would be. As far as Overland, we're keeping Head Start program into West Ridge so that it gives me a whole year. And through a grant that we've received and through some of the major maintenance money that we had was put away for Overland, and some energy rebates and things, we can bring that school up to a much better environment. But it is an older school, but it would be a better environment for the Head Start program. And the whole idea of providing them with a really good, suitable environment is to try to grow the program, which is good for the community, it's good for the school district. Some of the other programs that we've got, or some of the other projects that we have, is because of the efficiency systems that they have out there today, we looked at putting air conditioning into some of our older schools. It becomes an issue because when you go with mechanical cooling requires so much power to those units. Most of the schools are under the capacity to put in a large chiller, but there are what they call indirect coolers, indirect evap cooler systems, and there's a real high energy rebate on them. We can get these units through the ESSER funds because it has to do with ventilation of the buildings. And these units will be on, not only are we going to order them for Overland, but we're also ordering them for Walnut and for Desert View. The issue with the units is there's about a 22-week waiting period for these units. So right now, I signed a contract for the design of these units. And so the engineers will go through all three of these schools, and they'll design the units that we need. We'll go ahead and put the order in probably September, October. Well, as the orders come in, probably sometime this time next year, maybe hopefully in March, April, we'll concentrate, get Overland done first. Because once Overland is done, then when school is out for Walnut and Desert View, then we'll go ahead and we'll get those units running at those schools. So that will help those schools. They are really the last two schools to be taken care of as far as from the HVAC side, and they'll be upgraded to as far as the suitability score. There's still some other projects that we have to take care of, window openers and things like that. But overall, this year is going to be a busy year. We're putting in new for the 7th grade wing at the junior high, because 8th grade was an addition and the 8th grade is a newer addition. So it does have what we call DDC controls, which is direct digital control systems. And now we're going to go ahead and phase 1 will be upgrading the 7th grade edition. So by the end of the summer, 7th grade will have these will have new mechanical, what they call VAV systems, which is a volume air control system. They'll have VFDs, which changes the speed of the motors based on static pressure of the ductwork. But that wing will be up to date as far as HVAC systems. We still have lighting that we go through with the in fact, Rocky Mountain WattSmart program folks were here today, and there's still lots of energy savings that we'll do as far as lighting, changing out the now they're the old T8s and T10s and putting in LED lights. So we'll be working on those programs. We've got some other projects going on as far as around the district. Schools will be closed most of the summer, and that gives our crew a chance to go in, get everything all squared away, cleaned up, disinfected. We'll be looking at the UV lights and checking those out, checking the ionizers. So should we still be faced with any kind of pandemic, hopefully everything is settled down by the beginning of next school year, but we'll be ready if it's not. Other than that, it's going to be a busy summer. We probably will have the street in between the junior high and the admin building possibly closed for a little while because that culvert there, the box culvert, needs to be repaired. Just the way it was originally put in, through time, water has gone in through the cracks and has eroded all the dirt, the sidewalk, or the road. I keep calling it side because it's concrete. But the bridge decking is collapsing. That's why we drive over those big metal plates right now. So that'll be going out to bid here shortly. So it'll be a very busy summer for our maintenance crew and for contractors around town. And just a quick note too is when we do a lot of this work, I hardly, if ever, go out of town. Almost everybody that we use will be local folks, sometimes on the engineering, structural, and things like that, because the district has a history with some of these other guys from up in Casper where they're familiar with our schools. But for the most part, I would say 95% of the projects that we do will be from contractors and folks from right here in Rock Springs.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Do we
yep.
have some questions?
We do have some questions.
Okay.
I'm going to kind of group them together by the user. So one of them is masks in schools need to end. My child is questioning leaving the school district for another alternative because her health issues are beginning to worsen with continued mask wearing all day. I would like a response to this.
Go ahead. Do you want to go ahead? Superintendent McGovern?
Sure. I think first on there, I think everybody would agree with you. It's been a long year. Our kids will be in school 175 days and our staff, ourselves as well, wearing masks. So we're with you 100% on, we've been through a lot together. We've been very successful with wearing masks and we follow the health orders that are aligned with state statute that actually allow Dr. Harris to give orders like that for K-12 schools. And so we do follow those the very, very best that we can. And our district will not apply for a variance. First, to get a variance in schools, the county as a whole needs to be in the green. And so I'm not sure what the latest is that comes out on Wednesdays, but even if we were in green and our numbers as Sweetwater County as a whole are not that, we wouldn't be able to apply. The other is in our Smart Start reentry plan, when that was presented to our Board of Education, we had in there specifically that we would follow those rules throughout the whole pandemic to the exact letter of what those orders would be, and we support that. So I know we're all tired of wearing those, myself included. The weather's eventually going to start getting warmer, not counting the snow from yesterday, but we would agree. We don't want to do those anymore. However, we've been doing a great job and we want to finish up in these last final days. We don't want to lose any students. We want Sweetwater 1 to be the place for your student and for everybody else's student. But at the same time, we recognize that keeping them as safe as we can is what we need to do. And it by no means is it a political measure whatsoever. It is truly the health order that we follow. I know there's a lot that surrounds mask wearing and all those kinds of things, but for us, it really isn't. We've beaten the odds and we're very proud for that. So thank you as a parent and to all of our parents for helping us, especially in some of those times when it's been very difficult.
Kelly, there's a follow-up after your statement.
If I may.
Oh, yeah.
To follow up on Superintendent McGovern, not only do we have to be in the green, but I think we've had to be in the green for 2 weeks before we can actually apply for that variance. So we have been nowhere near that. And secondly, for those of you who may not have heard the news today, the FDA has cleared the Pfizer vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds, effective tomorrow. So, if you're interested in that, just check to make sure that they're giving the Pfizer vaccine because that's the only one that is cleared. But it has been cleared, and like I said, it will go into effect as soon as tomorrow. So if they have vaccines, so just an update on that. So
Nice, thank you.
and then you said you had a follow-up
Yep,
as
there's
well.
a follow-up from another user. So are you expecting to wear masks again in the fall?
Sure. The current orders that we have right now, they end on the 16th, and then the next order comes out, which would be the 27th edition for that. So for the fall, I would love to be able to say to our community and to our Board of Education that we won't need to. The honest answer is we don't know. It would depend on what the orders are at that time, and then we kind of take it from there. So hopefully the summer is very positive for Sweetwater County and for our state as well, and then we'll take a look at it when we get closer to the fall. However, if we do have families, I think it's important to say, if we do have families out there that will be attending summer school for grades 9 through 12, then we would follow the orders that are currently in place for our summer school students, the same way that we've done all school year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question, again, a couple parts to it. Is it the intent after the construction to move children back into Westridge? If so, how do you know how that will affect how schools will be structured in the 2021-2022 school year? And then additionally, do we know the cost of maintaining Westridge until children are back in that building?
Mr. Celeroli, would you like to address that?
Sure. Actually, there's the second part of the question I was going to answer, but no, kids are not going to go back. The kids that were in Westridge and now in Stagecoach are not going to go back to Westridge. As far as the cost of maintenance of the building, that is a really good question, because it's important that people understand you still have to maintain the building. The cost isn't, and it never was presented, that the maintenance cost will be less. You still have to go in there and check belts. You still have to go in there and change filters, maybe not as frequently, so you will have some savings there. There are still things that have to be done with the building to keep it going, which is why the state provides us a minimal amount of money. Now, as far as where the bulk of the savings is, and Westridge is kind of not a real good example, because we're going to move a program there that is not funded basically through the district, it's funded through federal money. So, but we won't have custodial costs, we won't have custodial supplies, we won't have the utility costs. Those are where the savings are when you close a building. So just say if we're closing Overland and we're not doing any construction in there, we're just mothballing it to decide what we're going to do, or we're waiting for capacity. Okay, the way it would work on my end is, as far as maintenance, we still have to have somebody go there and check the building out. You still have to have water in the toilets, because if you've ever gone to a building that has been inactive for any length of time, the toilets get rancid. So you still have to do a minimum amount of cleaning in those, not as though you have somebody in there all the time. The bulk of your savings would be filters. The average filter change in a school, especially nowadays with the newer filters, because we use higher efficiency filters, I would say for Overland, we're probably looking about $5,000 to $7,000 a quarter. So, there you might only change the filters once or twice in the year. So there's a savings of maybe $14,000 as far as material. But you wouldn't have custodial staff in there every day. So there's your savings of about, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but with wages and benefits for a full-time person, about $65,000 for custodial.
Yeah, that may be a little bit high.
A little high, so, okay. So if it was 50,000, you'd have 2 people, well, 1.5 people in that building. So there's your savings as far as, custodial care of the building. But, maintenance guys are still going to go in there and check the belts, because we can't afford to have the heating system go down in the middle of the winter time in an unattended building. It would turn out to be a nightmare. So to give you a ballpark figure of what it's going to cost maintenance, that's really it's very difficult to do. But as far as from the custodial services, things like that, you're probably looking close to, $80,000 a year in that savings just from that portion. But your utilities, you're obviously not going to run your heating system to 72. Some teachers will keep their thermostats at a 74. So now the building will be under one system. It'll probably maintain about a 58-degree temperature throughout the building, for the remainder of the year, throughout the winter. Windows closed, you're not going to do much ventilation with it. So the bulk of your savings is honestly going to be between custodial services and utilities, as far as the actual building cost. Hopefully, Danielle, that answers your question.
Thank you, Dan. The next
Thank you.
question we have, Mark asked, with the massive changes happening in the district next year, when will teachers be able to find out information about next year?
A significant part of the June board meeting, which is June 14th, will be dedicated to the preparations for next year, a review of the 4-day week, some information about the Fridays that will be, what's planned for teachers on the Fridays that they'll be working. We'll also cover accreditation, but that's the major focus of the June 14th meeting as far as moving forward, so that people would have an idea. We'll also be bringing forward for information, the transportation routes, so that parents can start looking at those and kind of get a heads up for what's going to happen there too. So hopefully that answers the question.
Lacey said the transition day was a great idea. My girls are no longer scared, instead looking forward to going to Sage. So some transition day feedback.
Thank you.
Jimmy asks, are we going to have an online option at Pilot Butte in the upcoming school year?
Superintendent McGovern.
Sure. Actually, the timing on that question is perfect. So thank you so much for asking on that. We will have a K-12 virtual school that we're going to start up for the fall for Sweetwater #1. For grades K through 6, we will have a dedicated staff member that will be able to teach solely online for our students that would like to participate in an online school. So it would be on a district level. So the question that we've got is, would it be at Pilot Butte? So if you had a student in 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, and they wanted to do an online school, then we would have a teacher for them. What we currently have for this year, we have really 2 different options for online. One of them is what we're calling asynchronous, like a regular online school, where students aren't piped in through our swivel cameras and such. They call it asynchronous. That is what we're referring to for next year. So it would truly be online. The CBV, the classroom-based virtual, on there, we're going to gather a little bit more information. I know some preliminary things were released from the Wyoming Department of Education. And so we'll get more information on that and be able to share that with our staff and our community as we know a little bit more. The CBV, the classroom-based virtual, was, we couldn't have done this year without it. We have the technology, thank goodness to our IT department. So if next year, if we had a student that had surgery and such, and they were home, they were recuperating well, and they needed to attend their classes just online for a temporary amount of time, you know, the swivel cameras and the CBV were a wonderful option. So hopefully we can continue some of those components into next year. But for a true virtual school, the answer would be yes. And we'll get more information out on that for our families. We're waiting for a couple more details to come in about, you know, what would registration and all those things look like before we actually take that fully public, so that our parents are well informed about what to do. But it's coming, and yes, we would have that in place for next year. We're excited about it. And truly, it's funded through some of our ESSER funds, their grant funds. Without that, we wouldn't be able to get this going. So good use of the funds to help with learning loss and meet the needs of all of our kids. But it's grant money that's helping us get that rolling.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple that kind of tie in together. One of them is, are you planning to require vaccines? And if your child gets the vaccine, will they still have to wear a mask?
We're back to the health orders.
We are.
Yeah, it all depends on what the health orders direct, you know, and where we are in terms of classifications and stuff like that. We'd love to say that we could be back to normal, but that's 3 months away, and we could be back to normal, or we could be in a different situation. So we just don't know at this time. We wish we could.
Yes, thank you. Will there be CBV students next year? If so, who will be teaching them? At one time, there was mention of having virtual school where teachers wouldn't be teaching both in-person and CBV students. I think you kind of touched on that, Kelly.
I think so. If there's more clarification that's needed, please follow up with another question. We'll be happy to.
Okay, our next question, why don't the classifieds, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Reedy? Sure,
Yes,
Mr. Reedy.
ma'am.
Mr. Reedy, please go ahead.
So I'm here. Mr. McGovern, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the standards require a certified school for homeschooling in order to get kids to go qualify for grants and such for college?
Homeschool, first I want to make sure that I didn't misspeak. So when I was talking about a student that had surgery and such, that would be homebound if they're home temporarily. So homeschool, it's actually governed under state statute. So if a family wanted to educate at home, we have a policy that is aligned to our state statute in which our families complete. It's required. There's a few questions that our families need to answer, and then they turn that in and move that forward. And then they truly can have the curriculum of their choosing of what they would like to do. The area that we watch in particular is one that our students between the ages of 7 and 16 are required to be in school of some sort. But the other would be for graduation requirements. We have our policy that we would make sure if they graduated from one of our schools, that they would have the credits that would transfer back in and to meet those requirements for that. But was there something else, Mr. Reedy, on homeschooling that you're looking for?
No, ma'am. I just wanted to hear a clarification because some people just assume that they're doing something through an accredited homeschool program when they're really not, and they're really shocked when that information is told to them that their child doesn't qualify for credit. And I wanted them to know that credits would be given through any program supported by this state and the county. Did I answer your question?
Yes, Mr. Reedy, I appreciate that. The one thing, a lot of our homeschool families that do that for their children and are very successful with that for them as an option for their children, they keep a close eye on those kind of things, particularly if they graduate from a homeschool program and then the student proceeds to post-secondary college or trade school, what the requirements are for them as their student moves forward. So that would be a caution piece for anyone that would be interested in that. And we would use that same rule of thumb for our students as well. Keep an eye on where they're at and then also what they're looking forward to doing once they graduate.
Thank you. Okay, our next question, why don't
Sure.
Why don't the classified staff know yet where they will be moved to? When can they expect an answer? It's very stressful and hurtful to be kept in limbo for so long.
Mrs. Bolton, you want to address that one?
Sure. We are actively finishing those up to be announced no later than the end of this week. One of the challenges we've had is we've had people resigning, so positions are opening, and there were multiple addresses that were incorrect in PowerSchool. Parents had not updated their information. And so what we originally had for where students were going for special education, a lot of that changed, which then changed the staffing again. And we do have more positions to move right now than positions open, and we're not going to hurt anybody. So it's just making sure that we're placing everybody in the right spot, but we will let everybody know by the end of this week where they are going.
Thank you. Danielle asks, if the transportation does not seem to work out, is the school district open to reviewing the start times for the K-6 grades?
I can speak on my behalf, and then if a trustee would like to follow up on for mine. I think because of the change that we're getting ready to go through, and we do know that our bus routes are going to be changing. From my behalf, I would not be recommending until we truly give adequate amount of time to see how the school start and end times go, just because of the amount of work and effort. And we know with change, it takes a large amount of time to be able to work through that. With any change process, it's not the first year that people actually have a lot of difficulty working through. It's actually the second and the third year, because the first year, everything is so new, they're adjusting and they're adapting, but it's that second and third year where people actually have difficulty. So I think, from my behalf, and ultimately this would be a board decision. And so trustees, I would refer it over to you, but I think until we truly give things time to work and see how they go for our families and for our kids, we need to allow that time.
Would you repeat the question, please?
Yes, it was, if transportation does not seem to work out, is the school district open to reviewing the start times for K-6 grades? And I'm going to go ahead and ask the next one that she asked because it ties in. What will the school be relying on to know whether this impacts the children and whether it is really in their best interest?
Well, I would agree that it's going to take some time to work some things out. That's why we are actually presenting the bus routes earlier this year than we have in the past, so that there's additional time for parents to take a look at that. I would suggest now, I believe that the timeline for requesting busing for the morning portion closed last Friday, if I understand that correctly. But if there are still some concerns out there, please contact the transportation department and see what they can talk to you about and so forth. So, but everything is probably not going to work 100% the very first day. I mean, when we've done things that we've done for years, there's always something that comes up the first day. So I think it's going to take us some time to work through some of these things. But as far as changing, I think we're going to have to give it some time. And I would concur with Superintendent McGovern about that. I don't know if Mr. Klingenpeel has anything to add to that, but like I said, the advance notice, please take a look at those. They will be well publicized when they come out. So please take a look at them. The new software, I think one of the nice things about the software that was explained at Monday's board meeting is the fact that when we get into weather, which probably will not be the first day of school, we hope. I know, we hope.
Like this year.
September was early this year.
Yep.
But, that the tracking, not the tracking, but the software that we will be using to actually help efficiently run the bus routes will actually be able to update in real time, as I understand it, that, if a bus is delayed because of weather, there's a traffic problem or something like that, and the bus is delayed, it will actually update in real time. So the parents aren't sitting there wondering, well, when's the bus coming? When's the bus coming? It will be able to, they'll have an updated time and those kinds of things. So I think, we're trying to work on being more efficient, but it is going to take some time to transition.
Definitely. Okay.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Jackman.
To your second question on what will the schools be using to rely on, what's the best intent for students? We use national research. We use our data points that come in every week across the schools through our PLC programs that we've implemented. We use the standardized tests. We use graduation rates. We use the ACT. I mean, we have whole people and whole teams dedicated to figuring out what's best for students. And it comes up from a national basis and what the entire country is doing, and even the entire world. We take foreign research as well. So there's a lot of people that work really hard to make sure any decision we make as a group is the best decision for your student.
Thank you. Okay, Mark says, since the workplace issues are off the negotiation table, will the district implement an independent anonymous staff climate survey to identify issues in the district?
We had this past year a survey that we were looking at, and under the circumstances, we decided to use that money, which would have been something in the neighborhood of about $60,000. We felt that we could better use that for things in district. So we chose to redirect that money. We are very interested in knowing how our staff feels about what they're doing and so forth. So we have a couple of systems in place. If you listen to the board meeting Monday night, I think that's an area that the board is in agreement that we want to create some avenues where there can be staff to administration, staff to board input. So I think we're going to be looking at some things like that. So that's an area of concern for us as well. So how do we get that two-way communication? I don't know, board members, if you have anything else that you would like to add to that?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Thompson?
so with the two-way communication, we did discuss a little bit since we do have the Sweetwater Education Association. We work closely with them, especially you, Carol, on what is coming, what comments are being received. And so I would encourage people to use that avenue until we can figure out another way to meet everyone, not just those who are in the SEA. So you need to give us a little time. If you have any suggestions, by all means, please pass those along so we can come up with a solution.
Thank you.
All righty. Okay, the next question, does the governor's executive order for vaccine passports in state or government entities extend to schools?
The passports, the vaccine passports, does it extend to schools? I don't.
No, we follow the separate orders that specifically say K through 12 schools. If it's not listed in that section, then it does not pertain to us.
That's why in our case, masks are still mandated, even though in the state that mandate has been lifted.
Yes, because we can't ensure the distancing that's required in the orders, and that's why the masks come in.
Okay, so we have Danielle again. I think she's speaking when you guys were talking about our last questions, and that references to early start times resulting in earlier transportation times for these children. She asks, are you aware that national research shows that earlier start time impacts younger students in a negative way, where research reflects in lower academic achievement in reading and math and behavioral issues?
Younger kids, it's positive.
Pardon?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Thompson?
when just going back to I'm assuming the start end times, maybe I should have taken the time to explain kind of where we arrived to where we are at now. We took all of that into consideration before we made, before we made a commitment. So we looked at all those statistics and all that data. And basically what it came down to is we had the elementary schools didn't want to go too early, and the high school students didn't want to go too late, the secondary kids. So we compromised and started everyone around 8 o'clock. So that's where we're at right now. We took all of the data in, and we looked at the secondary level, and they show even 15 minutes later makes a significant change. So to start them 30 minutes later, yes, it was a compromise, but we felt, or at least I felt, we're going in the right direction.
And to piggyback on that, Mrs. Thompson, we actually looked at some things a little bit later, and parents with secondary students didn't want it that late because of the impact with younger kids and so forth. So the whole start time itself was pretty much a community-driven compromise. The after schools are not impacted that much. The bus routes there will not be impacted much. It's the start times where we're going to have some difficulty, and that's why we've put out the request for particularly students that need need transportation to have filled that out, and if you haven't, then contact it. Mrs. Arnoldi shared this morning that if your child is on an IEP, that they will be you don't need to fill out anything, that they will be contacting the parents directly, if I understood that correctly.
Wouldn't be all students with
Specialized
yeah, it would be specialized transportation
Yes.
specifically.
So those with specialized transportation, so they'll be contacting those parents personally and individually.
Okay, Mark says, so then the district is not going to do anything to find out what staff really thinks. That is very disheartening.
That
And
is not what we said. I said it's a work in progress. We are currently working through SEA. I have monthly meetings with Superintendent McGovern, with HR, Mrs. Bolton. We have met with the SEA president and the vice president. We have met every month, and they do bring concerns and issues to us. So to say that we're doing nothing, I would respectfully disagree with that. Do we want to do more? Absolutely.
thank you. Are we planning on implementing vaccine passports for parents or students?
The only thing that we would do as a district for Sweetwater number 1 are items that we're directed to do under the current health orders for K-12 schools. If it isn't listed in a section in there, then we would not.
Okay. Is the new online program similar to the online K-12 or similar to now with a teacher teaching all day? Can we provide a few more details?
The virtual school K-12 that we're interested in doing is similar to the online K-12 programs. It's just that they would be part of our district as well.
Thank you. Okay, so will the school district be watching for any data to support the decision? I think we're back on the start times now. For instance, will the school district watch for increase with student behaviors and or lowering of academic achievement and reconsider since this decision to start earlier is actually against research on a national level?
Actually, the research, I mean, we used research-based information to come to the decision that we did. I think we're going to need to look at some of these indicators. It takes time for those kinds of things to be determined, whether it's academic or behavioral kinds of things. So I do not anticipate at all that we be on a time frame for a month and all of a sudden we decide to change. I don't think that is anywhere near a possibility. If I remember correctly, the start times, was it a 2-year or is it just for the year?
It's 2-year that we applied for to
With the
WDE, but actually that was for our calendar. School
So-
start and end times are solely a local
At the discretion
decision,
of the board annually.
as long as we meet the instructional hour requirement.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a local.
And that's the other thing I don't think sometimes our family members understand is not only do we've requested because of the 4-day week, we have a fewer number of days, but the reason those days are longer is because we still have to meet those hourly commitments in terms of students in class. Lunch times do not count, recess times do not count. So, we have to meet that. And that's why some of the times were designated, even though you think, well, it may be longer than what you thought, but it's because we have to meet those statutory and department rules regarding the number of hours that students are in class.
Thank you. Okay.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mickelson,
thank you. While we did look at research, we are unable, with the resources we're provided, to implement everything in the way in a perfect world that we would. When you look at impact of student outcomes, ACEs, adverse childhood events, trauma, hunger, housing insecurity, lack of access to medical care, poverty, abuse, all of those things have a tremendous impact on student outcomes. And the reality is that this board and this district are tasked with educating over 5,000 kids from incredibly diverse backgrounds, with very diverse needs, from the most severe, challenged special education student to the kid on the high-end gifted. And we have to do that with the resources that are provided to us by the state legislature. In making these changes, we are hoping to reap benefits to our students and our staff, and we will be watching that. But it is because we are talking about people, it is very easy to find peer-reviewed research that supports all kinds of different things. Because these are human beings, they're children, their families, our community. And if we were to make decisions based not on the outcomes of what happens to our kids, but solely based on research, right? It takes me back, there was a district in Alaska that was having an issue with their students learning English, and then they realized that their curriculum had a lot of red barns and farriers and things, and that none of the Inuit population they were trying to educate had any idea what those things were. They had no references for those. And so they had sound curriculum that was research-based, that was grossly inappropriate for their community. And so while it's unfortunate that we cannot address every single area in the way that we would like to, when we were going into this funding reduction because of the change in enrollment, the board directed the district to preserve two things: jobs and class size. And the way that that was done asked for some compromise and some difficult things and some things that are maybe not ideal, but a tremendous amount of work by the employees of the district went into ensuring that we do not have 30 kids in kindergarten, that we are not laying off teachers, that we are maintaining as many opportunities for students as we can. And I'm not, for my part, going to fixate on one area because I'm interested in the overall impact and changes to outcomes over time for our students. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been told our graduation rate has been stuck for 30 years. Doing more of the same is not acceptable if we want to move that measure. And so that is the reasoning and where I stand as an individual board member. We have to think of all 5,000 students and make the choices that have the most benefit for the group. And so there will be costs that we are aware of, and there were many, many public presentations where we went over the research, the decision-making, and everything that we've done, and I'm sure those things can be provided again. But at some point, I'm a very strong believer in parent choice in education. And if people cannot get on board with working with us and with the district, then they really need to seriously consider pursuing a different educational path for their family. Because what we cannot do is offer individualized educational plans for all 5,000 students. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mickelson. I want to make a correction. I stated that recess was not included in the number of hours, and in the elementary level, recess does count towards the number of hours. It's the lunch times and so forth that do not. So I wanted to make that correction.
I think Max kind of addressed, he must be looking in the comments as well. I think he addressed quite a few because they were tying into the same thing. I'll go ahead and read through them. Did we take into consideration high school students that will have after-school jobs affected by late release? Some students depend on their jobs. Danielle asked if we could provide the research we use to rely on to inform the public as to the reasoning behind the decision. I think Max did a nice job of addressing that. Next one, back to the health orders. If masks or vaccines are required next year, will you all step down so we can form a new board? The health orders come from the state.
The health orders come from the state. We are bound by, you know, we have rules that we have to follow as well.
Yes, we do, for sure.
I'm just going to step out there and say, because I'm never popular and I'm never going to be popular, but I want to thank our school board because these leadership positions are not easy and those are volunteer positions. They don't get a dime and they're very thankless jobs and they're not going to please everybody. And it seems like whenever somebody disagrees with something or doesn't get their way, they're keyboard warriors more than anything and are quick at the tongue to slam our board and tell them to step down. But I don't see any of you guys running for the board for these thankless jobs. And I don't see any of you guys taking on the entire county and school district so that you can implement what we're required to implement and they're doing the right thing. Doing the right thing is not easy. Whether you agree with it or not, we don't have a choice. This isn't political. We're following the rules we're under. And so I just want to thank our board because you guys, I mean, I know a lot of us have, but you guys have been hammered unfairly just because people don't get their way or they don't like what they're hearing. And I agree with Max. We've provided a lot of choice so people can do what they wish with their kids this year. And we tried to keep that open, but I just want to say thank you. I don't always agree with everything the board may say, or they don't agree with me, but there's this thing called respect and mutual respect. And sometimes you can just agree to disagree. I'm over the keyboard warrioring. I am.
I'll say that I think that we have a lot of change coming next year and I'm really excited. Like Max said, it's been 30 years of doing the same and that's obviously not doing it. So we have big change next year and I think it's going to be difficult. I think Kelly told me when I first started 6 years ago about the rule of 3 years. So the first year seems okay, second year is really hard, third year you're kind of getting into the groove. And I have seen that come true time and time again with different things that we've done. So I also want to thank the board because I know that every person in this district with every single decision that we make, we are doing absolutely what is best for kids. And I'm proud to be in this environment and to be part of an organization that does that. I want to catch up on questions too.
Well, let me interject at this point.
Yes.
The legislature right now is the entity. They hold the purse strings. You know, they're the ones that determine how much money the school districts get. So if you are unhappy with some of the decisions because they are financially related, we are doing the best, what we consider the best that we can do with the funds that we have. Every year we have been cut for at least 5-6 years now. And so I'm going to take this opportunity that if education is of value to you and your family, please take this opportunity to contact your legislators. They're the ones that hold the purse strings. They're the ones that just about a month ago, came to an impasse because they couldn't agree about how to replace some of the funding for education, given the drop in the energy industry, which was a primary source of the funding for the schools in the state of Wyoming. They're the ones that have come up with nothing in terms of replacing that revenue source. So they're not in session now, and that's a good thing because now is the time to contact them so that you can, see them in the grocery store or call them up and have a cup of coffee with them and say, the penny tax went nowhere because the Senate absolutely will not replace education funding. There is still a group of people out there, particularly in the Senate, that wants to see education cut by $100 million. That will devastate the 48 districts in the state of Wyoming, absolutely devastate them. If you think that cuts have been made now, if they implement that, just wait and see what the cuts are. We're not, I think because we were able to do what we did this year and moving forward, I think there may be some people out there that think that the sky is falling scenario that we may have presented was kind of, we poo-poo, it wasn't real. It wasn't real. It is real. Believe me, it is real. And given any opportunity, and we have some local legislators that fit into that situation that just want to cut. There is no extra money in education. We don't have pots of money sitting around that we don't know what to do with. It's just not true, regardless of what some of them are saying. So if you are interested, you can go to, there is a link on the school district website to the legislative website, or you can just Google Wyoming legislature. It's wyoleg.gov, I believe it is. And once you go to that website, you can put in your address and you can find out who your local senator is, who your local representative is, and their email address so that you can contact them. A few hints, if they are your legislator, tell them you are a constituent, because they do tend to pay a little more attention to their constituents than to other people's constituents. But there are clearly some friendly legislators when it comes to education funding, and there are clearly some that are not friendly. So tell them, keep it short, keep it concise, but tell your story. How has the funding changes affected your family? How have they affected your student? Those kinds of things. And again, keep it concise, but tell your story. Let them know that what they are doing is impacting your, if because the hours have changed, that impacts your ability to go back to work, or your ability to work because the hours have changed or something like that. If it's affecting childcare or something like that, let them know those kinds of things. There's a perception out there that because the federal money that's coming in, we don't need to worry about it. We're going to be fully funded. That's not true. There has been, in the last 5 years, there have been 3 what are called recalibrations. It's mandated every 5 years. So one occurred in 2015, one occurred in 2020, and one occurred in 2017, which was the unusual one because they hired a different company, and this is hundreds of thousands of dollars they're spending on these consultant groups to tell them how to, what's good about what education funding, where could we make corrections. Every single time they have been told there's nothing wrong with the funding model. You have an excellent funding model in Wyoming. The legislature just needs to fund it. And every year they have cuts. So those are the things that we're dealing with. We can only deal with the money that we get. They handle who gets the money and how much that we get. So please consider that moving forward. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything, but.
All right, I think.
Madam Chair, Mr. Reedy here, I would love to make a couple of comments.
Is that Mr. Reedy?
Yes, that's Mr. Reedy.
Mr. Reedy?
Yes. I would like to make a couple of comments, please.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Okay, ma'am, thank you. I want to tell you personally, thank you for your comments on where the blame lies and proving that it's not the district's decision, it's the state decision. I appreciate that comment so much. Thank you very much, ma'am. My next comment is to Ms. Bolton. Thank you, Nicole, for pointing out the fact that some people have more intestinal fortitude when they're not seen in person and they're a keyboard cowboy. Thank you for pointing that out. I was about to do that and you beat me to it, ma'am. Thank you so much. And Ms. McGovern, my last comment is that with what was going out today, or for the principals and everybody to review and see their signatures on it. I don't know if that's a good time to bring it up, but kudos to you and your team. You deserve to be recognized as much as anybody. This district has pulled us through a serious, serious epidemic that we have never figured that we would see, and came out on top of it. Ladies, I thank you and your teams from the bottom of my heart. You mean the world to me, and I would not want to sit on another board unless you were part of that board. So thank you very much. Everybody that's a trustee, I shout out to you. I have sat on this board, and I appreciate the work we have done through this pandemic. Thank you all very, very much. I'm done.
To piggyback on that, I want to thank all of our employees, from the custodians, the bus drivers, the nutrition services, teachers, administration, central administration, everyone. When this pandemic hit last spring, I mean, we pivoted very quickly. Going into into the new school year, the 2021 school year, you know, we implemented a Smart Start plan. We didn't know if we were going to have to shut down the next day, the next week, if we'd been a month. And we did have a snow day in September, which we were able to, you know, quickly turn to virtual. So I think I can confidently say our snow days are behind us, that we won't have to be making up days now because of snow days. So that's a good thing. But at the same time, we have been in school 5 days a week in person the entire year. There are not many districts in this state or in this country that can say that. So yes, there's been some bumps along the way. We have worked our way through it, but you know, there are schools that are still virtual and have not been in the classroom the entire year. And we are about to finish an entire year of being in person. So kudos to everyone. It's been an unprecedented year, and my thanks go out to everyone. Like I said, we know that there have been sacrifices made from every employee. We appreciate those very much. The dedication that they have given to their students and to their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a few comments here. Jennifer says, thank you to the Sweetwater Board and staff. There are over 5,000 students in the district. Ensuring that the requirements from the state is hard enough. It's even harder with a pandemic and now with a budget crisis. Each needing something different and many parents wanting to have something special or specific needs met. Mary said, thank you, Max. Amy says, thank you. Support our staff and admin. If the community would support the school, then the students will succeed. Mark said that no school board is able to make their own rules in contradiction to state health orders. Danielle says she attended all forums and or read the research and information provided. She spoke with Kelly and Nicole regarding information was told the research had not been reviewed for the early start K-6. My concern is for all students, K-6, not mine specifically, and I do not feel my kids need to be registered in a different school district, but the information parents relied on and the community relied on was changed last minute. Let's see here. Jimmy asks, does Biden's COVID release package that passed a couple of months ago provide any help to the school budget shortfall in the near future?
Some of those changes are designed, but some of the most recent one, the American Recovery Act, is that what ARP, the American Recovery Plan. Some of those guidelines aren't even out yet and stuff. So those are all grants kinds of things. So we will be applying wherever we possibly can. There is money coming, but there's also some restrictions. And in many cases, there's restrictions that we don't know about yet. So that's, again, a work in progress. That's very recent. Superintendent McGovern, would you like to add anything, or Mr. Duncan, either one?
No, I appreciate your answer on that one, Carol. That's really as much information as we have at this time on the ARP funds. It will come through the Wyoming Department of Ed in the grants management system. And as of yesterday, we didn't have anything in the system to apply for. And so once that comes through, we'll make sure that we move on that as quickly as we can and put into place a spending plan that we would bring before our trustees for their approval on the use of the fiscal monies coming forward. But I think that's going to be one thing that all of the districts, not only Sweetwater One, but all of the districts are going to be watching is what are the regulations going to be on the ARP funds. We do know that it's going to be a very difficult dilemma if those funds are going to be asked to fix budget shortfalls that come through from legislative cuts. And so I believe those are not the intentions of those funds. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this summer with our summer session and go into that the best that we can and use that money wisely so that it has a long-term effect in our schools and in our instructional programs.
Well, and to piggyback on what you just said, at least one legislator has said the districts better hold on to that money because they're going to be sending it back to the state. And I am not an attorney, but I do not believe that the federal funds are intended to supplant or replace state monies. So I think there's going to be some difficulty there depending on what legislators decide to do. As I said this morning, I did attend a School Boards Association meeting this past weekend. We have no idea. The update there was no idea what really is going to happen since the impasse occurred between the Senate and the House over the funding issue. They are on completely different pages. They are chasms apart in their approach from the Senate to the House as far as their funding. So we just don't know what's going to happen there. I will say for those parents who may not be aware, the nutrition services for breakfast and lunch has been continued through the 21-22 school year. So please take advantage of that. If you're not doing so, please take advantage of it. Again, I think there's a minor detail in the rule in that the students have to be enrolled in Sweetwater One in order to take advantage of that plan. But that is something that, we are concerned about the food insecurity and stuff. And so that's one way to help. And that's, again, we've been notified by the federal government that program is being continued for another year. So, thank you.
Chair Jellicoe, if I could, there was a comment in here about speaking with Nicole and I about research and not being reviewed for K-6, and I would like to address that comment as that is not true and unfair for that. All of the research we did speak with our parent here that's listed, but before the board made any decision on that whatsoever, all information through the task force and to the board were shared. All public comments, all surveys that Nicole conducted over both years for the 4-day week, the start and end times, all of that information went directly to the task force, to the administration, and to the board prior to making decisions. And I also know any public comment goes directly before a board meeting to the trustees, whether that is a public hearing or a monthly board meeting. And I think that's important. Our community knows that.
And I might add, we have read every single comment with the exception of, I believe there were 7 public comments at the April meeting that had were referencing a personnel issue, and we did not read those 7 for confidentiality reasons, but every other public comment has been read.
Okay, the next question, when will board meetings become in person again?
We are looking at that. Part of, we are looking at it. I can't give you a specific date. We hope soon, but we are looking at that.
Doesn't that depend on and I know Kelly might be able to speak to this, but doesn't that depend on the indoor restrictions that we have to be able to make sure we can limit the number of people?
Exactly. Under
Okay.
the current orders, the indoor is the limit of 500. And then if it's over 500 for your capacity, then it's 50% of that number for that. And then again, when they expire, I believe it's this Sunday, then we'll see what the next orders have to say, which is why outside events are a nice thing.
Yes, very much. Okay, the next question. My niece has not been able to attend, well, I guess it's more of a comment. My niece has not been able to attend in-person learning all year. I am more than grateful for my children to be able to attend their schools and programs in person. Elizabeth said, yes, it's because our school board, they kept our kids in school. Thank you, all employees of the school district.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mickelson.
thank you. I have two comments. The first, I'm very much looking forward to when public meetings return to normal, right? I think everyone is over COVID and all of the things that has required of us. I certainly hope, however, that we continue our practice of broadcasting the meetings on YouTube. We've had so much more participation since we have been able to send those out, not only live, but later when folks are able to go and see the work that's being done. I have had several people separate of this forum approach me and say that they wanted us to return to having the public attend in person because their opinion was that if a large enough body of people showed up and was disruptive, that either it would impel the board to resign or somehow pressure the board into complying with their wishes. And I just want to go on the record as my own individual trustee stance. I welcome public feedback. Every year I've been on this board, I have worked to increase and improve public participation. Coming to an elected body or official and sharing your opinion does not mean that you will not have that elected person's opinion presented back. Right? That's the whole point of our representative system, is that we're elected and we are to represent all of our constituents and consider all of that feedback and then make the decision that is in the interests of, in our case, students and employees, and also compliant with federal and state laws and regulations. On that note, it is under state statute 16-4, disruption of a public meeting. If a group comes and they feel that they can yell their way into being, that is not representing our system with fidelity. And I would fully support us ending that meeting and moving to a secure location, because we're grown adults and we're Americans, and that is not how we conduct business. Volume does not equal right. And so I just want everyone to be really clear. I hope every single board meeting we have going forward, when people can come, is jammed to capacity, right? Those have been my favorite meetings, including ones where parents have come and they've been very upset because it's education and it's about their kids and they're passionate, and that's fine. And that's awesome. And that's what we want. But if people come with the intent to circumvent how our system works, it isn't going to go well. It isn't going to work. I don't speak for the rest of the board, but I cannot imagine anybody on this board being faced with a crowd of angry people and saying, "Oh my goodness, this is too much for me. I resign." Right? That isn't how this works. And it's wonderful to have feedback, and I welcome the feedback that's very critical, including the person who asked, would we resign? Because then I have the opportunity to say, absolutely not. I was elected. I will serve my constituents, and in 3.5 years, God willing, I won't be running again. But if I do and they don't like me, then support a different candidate. Run, find someone. But do not expect, and again, I want to be clear, this is separate from people who are commenting tonight, that you will be able to gather a group of people to come and scream and disrupt our ability to do our sworn duty, and that we'll just wilt. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mickelson.
We just had a couple of clarifications from Danielle. She said, I simply meant when we spoke that information and research had not been considered at that time. I did not say it was not ever considered. She's not against the board or the school district. She's simply asking questions because there was not clarification. Also, in-person board meetings allow for open discussion and not a misinterpreted message.
Well, and we are looking forward to those in-person meetings again. I value people's opinion. I think that we learn a lot many times when we get those opinions. We find out what people's perspectives are. I think there's a misunderstanding that because a question is asked that the board may answer it at the same time. It's public comment. They're willing to take. It doesn't mean that the board is going to respond to them at that particular moment. So I do want to clarify that at the moment. But we look forward to those in-person meetings. But I'm with Mr. Mickelson. We've invested in the equipment to be able to stream. We are reaching many more families, many more parents with the meetings. Because Monday nights at 6 o'clock sometimes is not a convenient time, and they can go back and see what was discussed and what the discussion was and so forth. So I hope we intend to continue to stream those meetings, but we're anxious to get back to in-person meetings as well.
I will say that with the pandemic, it's really given me in my position in technology and my staff a lot of opportunities to kind of see how we do things and improve on that and become more efficient in ways. And I don't see us ever going back from not doing this.
There's a lot of things in education that I don't think are ever going to go back to just the way they always were.
Yes, for sure.
Chair Jellicoe.
Superintendent McGovern?
Sure. I'm wondering too, that the form that we have here for tonight really is a sense of risk that we're all taking as a community, our trustees, administration, and directors, being open for that feedback, positive or negative, on how we can improve. And I think that's an important thing. That's how we grow for that. In a board meeting during public comment, that is a little bit different. That is a formal meeting of the board that is held in public. And so when public comment comes in and that's delivered to our board, our trustees, and it's usually Carol as the chair, or if it's extensive public comment, then it'll be shared with a couple of the other trustees. But that really is much more formalized in that sense of environment, and that there isn't a lot of dialogue back and forth with that like this is through the chat. Very, very different in that type of situation. If there's a question, we like to answer that, of course, the board will answer, or Carol will refer that over to me or Dan Facilities or whomever has the expertise in that area to answer that. But I think it's important too that everyone understands what we're doing here this evening is very different than a formal board meeting in which public comment comes in and then the avenue which it's answered as well. Not that I'm seeing any different, but I do think it's important because we've really opened up how we communicate with our community, which is definitely the right way to go. But when it's in an actual board meeting per se, it's much more formalized. It's followed by Robert's Rules of Order and has a different take on what goes before the board and how it's responded to accordingly through motions and board action.
Well, and I will add when we've had our task forces, that's why we've opened up the public forums and so forth for some comment as well. This is the second forum today we had, or second informational forum. And we are, we've tried to answer every question that has been posed to us to the best of our ability. We're trying to be open about it. If we don't know, we don't know. When it comes to some of the public health rules and stuff like that, we just can't project that 3 months in the future. Right now, we can't even project past May 16th. So, like I said, we're open to the questions. We'll respond to them to the best of our ability. And this is the second time we've done this. And I think, at least I hope that people have gotten their questions answered. And we will probably continue to have these kinds of forums in the future. Again, we're not trying to hide anything. So please feel free. Do we have some more questions?
There's a couple of comments. Oops, scrolled. I know there have been some school boards around the country that have taken their community for granted and disrespected. I do not believe or think this school board would or could act like that. This is Rock Springs, Wyoming, where I believe our community and educators care too much for this small community, or so much, I bet. We did have a question, will the board meetings, I think we kind of answered this, but I'll address it again. Will the board meetings continue online even when you return to in-person meetings? We have the option to stay home and view live. Yes, we don't have any intention of stopping this train that started rolling down. It gives.
And again, the purchase of the equipment in order to do this,
Was from
we
COVID.
initially started out in Mr. Lemich's office because he personally had the equipment. Much of it was I believe, the first CARES package
Yes.
that provided us with the funds to do this. And so there's been a lot of good that has come out of some of this federal money to provide us with equipment and so forth that we can continue to use. And streaming the meetings is one very good example of that.
I have a question here for me or the board. That's my first question for me. It's kind of exciting. Okay. What does the district do with older technology? Is it possible to sell or auction it off? Typically, we recycle it. We use it until it is, we use it to death, nearly, literally. We have staff machines that we then repurpose into loaners or substitute machines or lead custodial machines. We typically recycle. We do provide our staff the opportunity to get on a list and potentially purchase a laptop. And I'm happy to say that for the second year in a row, we are able to offer our seniors that are graduating the opportunity to purchase an older laptop at a reasonable price to help them be successful in the next steps of their career. So that has been really successful. I know years ago when I was in the tech department, we used to do like the garage sale style, and that's a lot of work. There's a lot involved as far as erasing and making sure equipment is handled properly before we can dispose of it. I appreciate these forums here and hope the school will continue them even upon opening board meetings to the public again. I thank you all for taking the time. It's appreciated. And then Danielle, your message, I can see it, it's being held just because you're putting your personal information. I will hold that and share that with the board, just her contact information. Okay.
So we've answered all the questions.
Well, I think there needs to be the clarification on keyboard warrior. There is nothing wrong with people typing questions or making comments that we need to address or whatnot. What I was meaning is when people are asking, and I know this is what George Reedy meant too, is that when we're trying to do this and someone asks a question and then they have a rude comment or something to follow, or that's what I mean by keyboard warrior. And that's it. This people being able to write and comment and stuff, this has been excellent just for the interaction and then the involvement and giving us a heads up on what to answer. And so keyboard warrior by no means means, asking a lot of questions or asking inquiries about research or anything like that. Nothing to do with that. I'm talking about, I was only simply talking about the disrespect, and we can agree to disagree sometimes, and we can be respectful.
Yes.
Thank you. Any last questions?
Oh, sorry, I'm sending that email to you that I said I was going to
Okay.
send.
I would like, as I see that we're approaching 7:30, so I would like to thank all of the people here tonight. Trustee Mickelson and Mr. Reedy, who joined us virtually, thank you very much. Trustee Jackman and Thompson for being with us tonight, as well as all the directors and Superintendent McGovern and Mrs. Bolton. Thanks to all of you for taking the time from your busy schedules to tune in, ask your questions. I hope we've been able to satisfy your question. If not, please follow up. I think this is a venue that we are going to continue to use to open the communication and clarify some things and give the public an opportunity to ask questions that may not be asked, at least publicly, other ways. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us tonight, and have the rest of a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.